My parents forced me to babysit my nephew every day while I was job hunting, so I moved out overnight and blocked them permanently. I'm a 27-year-old guy, and this happened just last year when I was living with my parents after getting laid off. I worked in marketing for a mid-sized tech company, stable job, decent pay, decent life. But when they downsized after a merger, I was one of the first to go. Severance helped for a bit, but rent in the city wasn't sustainable without income. So, like many reluctant adults, I packed my stuff and moved back into my old room at my parents' place. I told myself it would just be for a month, 2 at max, until I found something else. The first week back was quiet. Uncomfortable, but quiet. Then, my sister, who's a single mom, called early one morning and said, "Hey, I've got a job interview. Can you watch Liam just for a few hours?" Of course, I said yes. I love the kid. He's 4, curious, loud, sticky-fingered, and always calling me Uncle Bug, which is a long story involving a childhood bee sting. Anyway, I figured it was no big deal. She dropped him off at 8 a.m. and said she'd be back by noon. She showed up at 7 p.m. No explanation. No apology. Just a thanks, you're a lifesaver. And a rushed hug before speeding off. I let it slide. Maybe she was nervous. Maybe the interview ran long. Whatever. But then it happened again. And again. And again. What started as just for a few hours became full-day babysitting, 5 days a week. At first, I didn't argue. I was already home all day sending out resumes and tweaking cover letters. And I love my nephew, I really do. But something about how expected it all became started to gnaw at me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't being asked anymore. I was being used. By the second week, it was official. I had somehow become Liam's full-time babysitter. Every morning, without fail, my sister would show up around 7:30 a.m., barely making eye contact, dropping him off with a rushed, "He's already eaten," and vanishing before I could say a word. Some days, she wouldn't come back until after 8 p.m. I started planning my bathroom, breaks like a soldier on a mission, waiting, until Liam was distracted with cartoons or snacks before I could breathe for 10 minutes. I missed 2 phone interviews because he threw a tantrum in the background. One was with a startup I was really excited about. The other, I didn't even get to hear who the company was. Liam had an accident on the carpet, and by the time I cleaned it up, I'd missed the call entirely. When I told my mom I needed some time to focus on job applications, she just sighed and said, "You're home all day anyway. Why not help your sister?" My dad, never one to get involved, just muttered, "Family sticks together." And my sister? She didn't even pretend to be grateful. No thank you texts. No, "Hey, are you okay?" No offer to buy groceries or pitch in for gas when I drove Liam to daycare one day because she forgot. She even made a joke once. "You're cheaper than daycare and don't ask dumb questions." She laughed. I didn't. I tried bringing it up once, just once. I said, "Hey, I need some structure if I'm going to get back on my feet. Can we make a schedule or figure something out?" She blinked, looked confused, and said, "Seriously? You're acting like I'm asking for the moon." That was the moment I realized. This wasn't temporary anymore. They didn't see me as someone trying. They saw me as someone available, and that resentment, it stopped knocking. It walked right in and made itself at home. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't new. It was the same pattern, just in adult clothing. Growing up, I was always the responsible one, the quiet kid who cleaned up, apologized, and kept the peace. My sister Emma was the golden child. She could do no wrong. When she stayed out too late, I got lectured for not keeping an eye on her. When she failed a class, my mom said, "Why can't you help her study?" When she crashed my bike into a fence when we were 12, I got grounded because I shouldn't have left it where she could take it. I didn't see it as favoritism back then. I thought I was being a good brother. But now, standing in the same house years later, wiping jam off the counter while Liam screamed for another popsicle, I realized it had never stopped. It had just evolved. My parents had enabled her all her life, and I had been the one picking up the slack. Now, instead of a broken toy or missed curfew, it was an entire human being I was responsible for. The few times I tried to speak up, the emotional guilt tripping came in waves. "Don't be selfish," my mom said one night when I mentioned applying for jobs outside the city. "Your sister's doing her best," my dad added. "You're home, she's working, it's only fair," they'd repeat like a chorus I couldn't silence. But it wasn't fair. It was exhausting. Every word of protest made me sound ungrateful, and every time I stayed quiet, they took more. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about helping family. This was about control, and I had been conditioned my whole life to obey. It happened on a Thursday. I was already running on fumes. That week, I'd been watching Liam for 5 straight days, from sunrise to late evening. He'd started having nightmares, waking up crying for his mom, and every time I tried to settle him, I felt like I was failing him somehow. I had a virtual interview the next morning with a company I'd been emailing back and forth for weeks, a remote position I was actually excited about. That night, Emma texted me, "Running late, be there in an hour." An hour passed. Then 2, I called. No answer. At 11:47 p.m., I got another text. "Just let him sleep there. I'm staying with a friend." No warning. No apology. No asking. Just a decision made for me. I stayed up most of the night because Liam kept waking up. I eventually dozed off at 6 a.m. and missed the interview at 8. When I realized what had happened, I just sat on the floor in the kitchen, my hands in my hair, the Zoom link still open on my laptop, blinking like it was mocking me. I waited for Emma to show up, but she didn't arrive until noon. No explanation, no guilt, just a half laugh and a "he's clingy when he doesn't sleep in his own bed." Later that afternoon, I told my mom, "This can't keep happening. I'm burning out." She looked up from her crossword puzzle and said, "Well, maybe if you got a job, we'd stop depending on you so much." That was it. That sentence. That tone, something broke in me. Not snapped, broke. Quiet and deep, like a hairline fracture that suddenly gave way after years of pressure. A week after the missed interview, I got an unexpected email. A small marketing firm based overseas had liked my portfolio and wanted to bring me on for a part-time freelance contract, remote, flexible hours, decent pay. It wasn't full-time, but it was something. A spark in the darkness. I didn't tell anyone. Not my sister. Not my parents. I wanted to see if they thought I was working again. Would they back off? Would they treat me differently if they believed my time had value? So, the next morning over breakfast, I casually said, "Hey, I'm starting some freelance work. Won't be available as much." My mom nodded, half listening. My dad mumbled, "Good for you," with his mouth full. Emma didn't even blink. She dropped Liam off the next morning at the same time, earlier actually, and said, "Hope your little side hustle can work around nap time." She said it with a smile. Like it was a joke. Like my job was some cute hobby and her schedule still came first. I tried to work during Liam's nap hours, late at night, early mornings. I sent emails with cartoons blaring in the background. I had meetings with my mic muted, praying Liam wouldn't start crying, and through all of it, they kept piling more on me, but now I was getting paid. Not enough to move out just yet, but enough to start saving. I opened a new bank account, started tracking every rupee, cut back on snacks, stopped eating out, said no to weekend hangouts. Because for the first time in months, I had something they didn't know about, and that secret was the beginning of my way out. Every time I tried to speak up, to even hint that I was feeling overwhelmed or taken advantage of, they twisted it into something else. "You live here for free," my mom would say like it was a magic phrase that erased boundaries. "Family helps each other," Dad would chime in, even though he hadn't lifted a finger to help with Liam once. "And Emma?" She'd laugh and say, "He loves you, you're like a second dad to him." Don't make this weird. It wasn't just the words, it was the tone. The way they said it, like it was my fault for being uncomfortable. Like I was the one being unreasonable for not wanting to give up every waking minute of my life for someone else's kid. But when I asked, very politely, if I could have just 2 days a week free to attend job fairs or networking events, my mom stared at me like I'd cursed at her. "Wow," she said, folding laundry like she was narrating a crime scene. "So you're really that ungrateful now?" Emma jumped in. "You know what? Next time you're in a bind, don't expect me to be there. I won't forget this. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was just tired. Tired of begging for permission to have a future. Tired of feeling like a criminal every time I asked for space. They kept telling me I was part of the family, but only as long as I played my role. The moment I stepped out of the script, they acted like I was betraying them. That night, after Liam went to bed and the house finally went quiet, I sat on the floor of my childhood bedroom and opened my laptop. I typed into the search bar, "Studio apartments near me, no roommates." And for the first time in months, I let myself imagine a life that was mine again. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and Liam was throwing a full-on meltdown because the Wi-Fi was down and his cartoons wouldn't load. Desperate to distract him while I fixed the router, I grabbed my sister's iPad from her bag. She had left it at the house that morning, and handed it to him. He opened a random game, quieted down, and I breathed for a second. Then a notification popped up in the top corner. Family Gang. It was from a group chat. Emma, Mom, and my Aunt Farzana. I wouldn't have looked. I shouldn't have looked. But curiosity cracked open something in me, and I tapped it before I could stop myself. The most recent messages were still on the screen. Emma. He's still looking for jobs? Oh wow, Mom. At least he's useful for something now. Aunt Farzana. Don't worry, he's too soft to say no. Always has been, Emma. He should be grateful we're letting him stay rent-free. He acts like a martyr. Mom. He needs to grow up. Still playing victim at 27. My stomach dropped. I scrolled up. There were weeks' worth of messages. Little jabs. Snide jokes. Mocking how I acted stressed and wanted a gold medal for watching a toddler. Jokes about me being unemployed by choice. I locked the screen. Put the iPad down and walked into the kitchen like a ghost. They didn't just not appreciate me. They disrespected me. Behind my back. In writing. Like it was some mean girls' club where the only requirement was tearing me down. That night I didn't sleep. Not because of Liam. Because now I knew the truth. They didn't love me the way I loved them. And maybe they never had. My birthday crept up quietly that year. I hadn't told anyone about it, but I figured they'd remember. I mean, it's family. Maybe they'd do something small. Cake, dinner, even just a happy birthday. Something to remind me I still mattered. I went to bed the night before feeling oddly hopeful. Stupid maybe, but hopeful. At 6:45 the next morning, I woke up to the sound of knocking. Heavy, impatient knocking. When I opened the door, there was Emma. Half dressed for work, coffee in hand, Liam clinging to her leg. Can you take him early today? I've got a meeting, she said, brushing past me. I froze. I started, but she was already halfway down the stairs. It's fine, I'll grab him after dinner, she shouted. Dinner. Right. Maybe that's when they'd celebrate, I thought. Maybe that's the plan. But dinner never came. By 8 p.m., the house was dark. Mom and Dad had gone out to visit Aunt Farzana. Emma texted that she'd be late again. No one said a word about my birthday. Not even a lazy Facebook post. Nothing. I made instant noodles for myself and Liam. He sat at the table swinging his legs and asked, Uncle Bug, why are you sad? I smiled the best I could and said, I'm just tired. Buddy, after he fell asleep in my bed, I sat in the bathroom, the light buzzing overhead, the sound of the old fan humming like static, and for the first time in a long time I cried. Not the quiet kind you can hide. The kind that comes from deep inside, the kind that leaves your chest aching and your face burning. That was the night I realized I wasn't part of a family. I was just their convenience. Something in me shut off after that night. Like a light switch flipped in the back of my brain. Not rage. Not even sadness, just silence. I stopped arguing. Stopped explaining myself. Stopped hoping for something they were clearly incapable of giving. The next morning, when Emma dropped Liam off without knocking, I smiled and said, No problem. When my mom mentioned I should mow the lawn since you're just home anyway, I nodded and said, Sure thing. When my dad made a passive-aggressive comment about grown men living with their parents, I chuckled and kept washing the dishes. They thought I'd mellowed out. That I was finally learning my place, as my mom once put it to my aunt on speakerphone. She didn't know I was in the hallway. But really, I was just done wasting energy on people who saw my silence as obedience. I started wearing headphones all the time, cheap ones that didn't even play music half the time. I just wanted the noise around me to fade. It was like building a barrier between their world and mine, a world where I had plans. Quiet ones. I began organizing my things in secret, packing small boxes in the trunk of my car at night, transferring files from my old laptop to my new one, making lists of what I'd need to buy when I left, soap, towels, a mattress. They still treated me like a shadow. A tool, an unpaid favor with no expiration date, but I was already gone in my head, and the more invisible they made me, the easier it became to disappear for real. It was a Friday afternoon when Emma strolled into the kitchen, sunglasses on her head and her overnight bag slung across one shoulder. Liam trailed behind her, dragging a stuffed dinosaur by the tail. "Oh, meant to tell you earlier," she said casually, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge. "I'm heading out of town with some friends. Just the weekend." "You've got Liam, right?" I blinked. "You're leaving now? For 3 days?" She shrugged like it was nothing. "Yeah, I meant to give you a heads up yesterday." "Sorry, I've been swamped." My mom walked in just then and smiled like this was the most normal thing in the world. "We already packed his favorite snacks. He'll be fine with you." My dad from the living room added without looking up, "Try not to spoil him too much." And that was it. No question. No conversation. Just another decision made for me, not with me. I stared at Emma as she kissed Liam on the forehead and walked out the door like she was dropping off a coat at the dry cleaners. Something in my jaw clenched. My hands were still wet from doing the dishes, but I could feel the tension all the way into my arms. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I didn't ask why. I waited until they all went to sleep that night. Then I pulled out my laptop, opened the bookmarked listing I'd saved a week ago, and clicked Apply. I filled out the lease, scanned my ID, and hit Submit. Then I booked a mover. Cash up front. No questions asked. 3 days. That's all I had to wait, and this time they wouldn't see it coming. I spent the next few nights packing in silence. After everyone went to bed, I'd wait an extra hour just to be sure. Then I'd pull out boxes from under my bed and fill them with what little I owned, some clothes, my laptop, a few books I refused to leave behind. I packed quietly, deliberately, like every movement mattered. No creaking floorboards, no clinking hangers, just me and the sound of my own heartbeat. I changed my address with the bank and the freelance platform I worked on. Had mail redirected to a P.O. box for now. Ordered a new SIM card using a friend's address. Transferred my savings to a separate online account Emma didn't know existed. No paper trail, no shared access. Everything I needed to disappear. I kept a running checklist on my phone under the title Project Clean Slate. Every time I ticked something off, I felt lighter, stronger, more real. The house still buzzed with the same fake warmth. My mom asked me to pick up groceries. Dad left his socks everywhere. Emma texted constantly with don't forget reminders like I was her unpaid assistant. But I smiled and nodded and said sure, because I knew it was almost over. Then, like fate had handed me an open door, Emma called on Wednesday morning and said she had an emergency shift. "Can you watch Liam just for today? I'll pick him up before dinner." It was perfect. I fed him lunch, turned on his favorite movie, and texted Emma back, "Sure, no problem." She had no idea that while Liam watched cartoons, I was on the phone confirming my move-out time. By the time she came back, I'd already chosen my freedom. I just hadn't left yet. At exactly 2:07 a.m. on a Thursday, my friend Saad pulled up to the curb in his old Honda with the backseat folded down and the trunk open. No questions, no small talk. Just headlights off, engine humming low, and a nod that said, "Let's do this." I had already stacked everything I owned by the front door. 2 duffel bags, 1 box of electronics, and a laundry basket of essentials. Everything else, old clothes, childhood trophies, stuff that didn't serve me anymore, I left behind. I didn't need it where I was going. We moved fast. Quiet. The only sound was the rubber soles of our shoes, hitting the tile and the distant whir of the ceiling fan in the living room. Before I walked out for the last time, I placed a folded piece of paper on the kitchen counter. It was short. Just 1 sentence written in black ink. "Don't contact me. You've made it clear I'm only valuable when I'm useful." No name. No explanation. Just truth. Then I walked out and closed the door behind me. Not softly. Not with guilt, just closed. In Saad's car, I pulled out my phone and did it all at once. Blocked my mom. Blocked my dad. Blocked Emma. Deleted the family group chat. Turned off location sharing. Changed my number. Deleted WhatsApp. It was like cutting strings from my back, one by one. I expected to feel scared. Instead, I felt free. An hour later, I was standing inside my new studio apartment. Bare walls, secondhand furniture, a window that overlooked a quiet alley. It smelled like dust and fresh paint. The silence was overwhelming. I sat on the edge of the mattress and let out a long, shaky breath. No yelling. No guilt, no obligation, just me, and for the first time in years. That was enough. The first few days were strange. I kept waiting for the explosion. Calls from unknown numbers, texts from fake accounts. My mom showing up outside my building like some guilt-ridden vigilante. But nothing came. Just silence. At first, it made me uneasy. Guilt crept in late at night like an old injury flaring up. I'd ask myself if I overreacted. If maybe, just maybe, I could have handled things better. But then I'd remember all the nights I stayed up with Liam while they slept peacefully. The missed interviews. The birthday they forgot. The group chat. The way my mom looked at me like I was disposable, and that guilt turned into something else. Clarity. I focused on the freelance job and started gaining more clients. I set alarms to wake up early, not because someone expected me to, but because I wanted to. I found a small cafe 2 blocks away with terrible Wi-Fi and amazing coffee, and after a few visits, the barista started remembering my order. Her name was Zoya. She asked me one day if I was a writer. I said no, but maybe I'd start. I signed up for therapy through an online platform. I'd put it off for years, always telling myself I didn't need it. But after just 2 sessions, I realized how much I'd been carrying. How much wasn't even mine to carry. I bought a notebook and started journaling, just little things at first. What I ate, what I felt, what I didn't feel. It helped me track my healing like mile markers on a road I didn't even know I was traveling. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, I slept through the night. No crying, no footsteps, no weight on my chest, just peace. About 3 weeks after I moved out, I got a message on Instagram from my cousin Naveed. We hadn't talked in almost 2 years. Hey man, what's going on? Your mom said you ran off. Something about drugs? I stared at the message for a long time. Read it, reread it, then let it sit there, like a moldy dish I couldn't bring myself to wash. Apparently, the silence had started to crack on their end. But instead of reaching out, instead of asking how I was or why I left, they decided to write their own version of the story. I heard bits and pieces from mutuals over the next few days. That I was mentally unstable. That I'd gotten into something dark. That I'd hit someone during an argument. Emma told people I couldn't handle life as an adult and snapped. Mom told relatives. I was going through a breakdown and refused. Help. They made me the villain in a story they created. Because acknowledging the truth would have meant facing their own reflection. I never responded, but I started collecting. I dug through my messages. Took screenshots of every time they dumped responsibility on me. I still had the group chat open on Emma's iPad before I'd logged out. Those texts, the mockery, all of it. I saved everything to a secure folder on my drive. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted proof. For myself. For anyone who ever asked. For the part of me that still doubted my decision in the middle of quiet nights, they could lie. They could twist. But I had the truth, and that gave me something I never had growing up in that house. Control. I didn't want drama. I didn't want a screaming match or some messy family group chat meltdown, but I also didn't want to stay silent anymore. So I wrote. Not on Reddit, not in public, but in a private blog I'd been toying with since I moved out. It started as a journal. Just a place to dump thoughts, but this time I turned it into something more. One post, one long, detailed post. No names, no insults. Just the story from beginning to end. The babysitting. The emotional manipulation. The guilt. The forgotten birthday. The group chat. The lies. Anyone from the family reading it would know exactly who it was about. I sent the link to Naveed, the cousin who had messaged me. No explanation. Just the URL. 3 days later, I got another message from him. I had no idea. I'm sorry. Then one from another cousin. Thank you for telling your side. You didn't deserve that. A few aunts stopped liking Emma's Facebook posts. One even commented something vague but clearly pointed. Funny how some people rewrite history. And then, Emma called. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I watched her name light up on my screen and then hit block without a second thought. That simple, she couldn't twist it anymore. The narrative wasn't hers to control. They could whisper. They could gossip. But the full story, the truth, was out there now, breathing in the open air. and I didn't have to yell to be heard. I felt powerful. Not in a loud, revenge-fueled way, but in the quiet, solid way that comes when you finally stop asking for permission to tell your own story. It's been a year now. I have a full-time remote job that actually respects my time. My studio apartment is still small, but it's mine. The walls are covered in soft colors and warm light. And I've even managed to grow a little plant in the kitchen window, some kind of peace lily. Ironically, I haven't spoken to my parents or sister since the day I left. Not a word. Not a text. Not even a drive-by glimpse. And to be honest, I don't miss the noise, but Liam, that's different. Sometimes I still hear his little voice in my head, asking for another popsicle or calling me Uncle Bug in that high-pitched giggle. Sometimes I wonder what he's being told now, if they're rewriting me in his mind too. That's the only piece of it all that still aches. Not regret. Just grief for the connection that didn't get to be more. But even then, I know I made the right choice. Therapy's been a game changer. It helped me recognize the patterns I kept excusing as normal. Helped me understand that love without respect isn't love, it's control dressed up in guilt and obligation. I've learned to say no without apologizing. I've built friendships that feel mutual, and I've started writing again, not just about the past, but about who I want to be next. Every now and then, the guilt tries to creep back in. But I remind myself, sometimes walking away is the most loving thing you can do, for yourself. I didn't leave to hurt anyone. I left because I was already bleeding, and now with a quiet mind, a locked door, and a life I actually want to wake up to. I may have lost a family, but I found freedom.